dissociations of planes that were often contradictory. A century later in Florence, Masaccio, under the influence of the architect Brunelleschi, painted the fresco of the Trinity in the church of Santa Maria Novella, applying new principles to the representation of space. When looking halfway up the fresco, the lines of perspective of the alcove's coffered ceiling give an impression of depth. Sassetta, who may well have seen Masaccio's fresco, adopts the same principles, the lines of the marble cornice on which the saints are standing, and the lines of perspective leading to the Virgin's throne converge, thus giving depth to the space of paradise. In the narrative scenes, a sense of perspective is sometimes created by means of very angular architectural constructions, including colonnades, platforms, successive rows of buildings. The painter contrasts background and foreground. The attentive horse and its tiny companions at the far end of the road, the drops of sweat and blood of Christ, and the distances. One formal innovation is the way volume is represented. The eyes are spherical and turn in their orbits. Bodies are now given depth, their contours clearly defined. This is due on the one hand to the modulation of color. 5 shades of the lacquer throw the toga of John the Baptist into relief. And on the other hand, it is due to the play of shadows produced by verdaccio, a mixture of brown and green pigments. Sassetta joints, furrows, runes, doing so. Hands and feet a fundamental role. They display stigmata, or make key gestures. Movement. Piero de Bernadone's furious gesture when his son leaves the Holy Order. The physical attitude of him to go through fire. The headlong flight of the apostles from the Mount of Olives. On occasion, the limbs are in equilibrium, creating a kind of tension, a momentary suspension of the narration. In the St. Francis in Glory, 2 processes are used to suggest the great depth of the sea or lake. The repetitive motif of the diminution, the process of desaturation is also used for the blue sky. Sassetta recreates with great simplicity the shades of the Tuscan sky. The gold backgrounds, once polished like mirrors, have been abraded by successive cleanings. Today, the underlying layer of red Armenian bole is largely in evidence. On most of the large panels, the color systems have faded. Judging by the clever balance of colors in the portrait of St. John, they must have been very subtle. For each shade of rose there is a corresponding in the coat. The flesh tints of the angels, the Virgin and the infant Jesus, as well as the pink shades of paradise visible behind the throne, and the lining of the coat, all form bright patches of color. On the front of the ptic, the colors arranged, most brilliant effects are central. The same holds true for the reverse side, where the brightest colors are concentrated in the center. The painter highlights the radiance of the mandorla, the oval body of the saint, halo, the circular around his head. When seen from its the rearranged panels and the alternate backgrounds of gold and blue skies produce an effect of symmetry. This symmetry of the whole is repeated in those scenes that are often divided into 2 successive episodes. Sassetta also likes to oppose interior and exterior scenes. Sassetta's poliptic forms a complex network of images. A counterpoint is set up between several narratives. The first story, the life and passion of Christ as announced by St. John the Baptist and recorded by the evangelists. Christ in his mother, the adult Christ in the different stages of the Passion. Christ in allegorical form. According to ancient legend, the pelican slits open its stomach to feed its young, echoing the position of Christ himself. The second story, that of St. Francis. In the life, miracles, suffering and death of the saint, the cycle of the sacrifice of Christ is repeated by transposition. His position with outstretched arms evokes that of the Messiah. St. Francis, a second Christ, is a theme that sometimes appears in Christian legends from the end of the 14th century onwards. The three vows of the Franciscan order, chastity with its stalk of lilies, obedience under its yoke, and poverty, are opposed to lust reclining against a black pig. Arrogance, an armed warrior with a lion, and avarice, an old woman grasping a bag of gold and flanked by a dog. St. Francis bears the stigmata. In September 1224, near the grottos of Mount Alverne, a seraph with 6 pairs of wings, resembling Christ crucified, appears and impresses upon his body the marks of the 5 wounds caused by the nailing to the cross and the spear thrust of the Roman soldier. St. Francis was the first person to receive the stigmata. His wounds, which he did not like to show, were real, bleeding and suppurating, so that the monks had to bandage them each day until his death. Other mystics after him were similarly marked: Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, Catherine Emmerich. Cases of stigmatization are still found to this day, as witnessed by the life of Padre Pio. And lastly, the third story, that of Ranieri, which repeats, on a more modest scale, the life of poverty and the miracles of St. Francis of Assisi. He too made predictions and performed miracles. His exemplary life story is recounted in the hope that he may become a saint, his glory shared by the little town of Borgo San Sepolcro. All these stories are intermingled in the pictorial representation. Tense, forehead puckered, mouth open, St. John the Baptist speaks to Ranieri and indicates the central scene to him. Ranieri's gaze is thus directed to the Virgin and Child. In the same way, the angel's eyes, like that of John the Baptist, converge on the Virgin and Child. But the Virgin and Child look at the Bible held by St. John. As for St. Anthony of Padua, he looks outwards, towards the faithful, as if inviting them to take part in the scene portrayed. The other side, meant particularly for the Franciscan monks, allows them to meditate on the stages of asceticism of their founder saint. The entire altarpiece was thus based on a rigorous model which the painter himself did not decide upon. The people who commissioned the work were provincial and remained attached to an archaic form, the Gothic altarpiece with separate compartments. Sassetta respected his religious project, but he introduced some Florentine modernism into a complex work that was to greatly impress all visitors. One of them, Piero della Francesca, drew inspiration for his Madonna of Mercy from the silhouette of St. Francis. Sassetta's poliptic undoubtedly marks the apogee of a form. At first, no more than a simple panel, the altarpiece becomes more complex during the Gothic period, when it is comprised of a great number of panels. In the northern schools,